Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us for this webinar sponsored by the Global and International Engagement Office of the IUB School of Education. Our topic today is embodiment and pedagogy, and we're joined by Professor Anja Kraus. Professor Kraus is Professor of Arts and Culture Education at Stockholm University in Sweden. She studied philosophy, educational sciences, and art education in her home city of Berlin, Germany. Her research interests are corporeality in educational contexts, phenomenological, ethnographical, and theoretical research on practices, transcultural learning, teacher education, and different questions within arts education and pedagogical anthropology. She has published widely in these areas. I first had the pleasure of meeting Anja and beginning to learn about continental pedagogy and more specific German traditions of pedagogy in approximately 2019. Because of my fascination with teachers' everyday practices, I was immediately drawn to Anja's work, and I'm glad to have her with us today. One of the things, Anja, that really drew me to your work initially was concerns that I had with what we often call instrumental approaches to pedagogy, and I was particularly concerned with areas where teaching is standardized and ways in which these instrumental images of pedagogy control and manage teachers. Your work, of course, looks at pedagogy with a much broader view and sees pedagogy as being concerned with so much more than that. Can you explain this much more and broader perspective to us?
Yeah, thank you for inviting me, and I give back the praise. It's very interesting to work with you, Dan. We have written texts together, and we go to conferences together because it's so interesting to work on topics, because our perspectives are very different and very much coined by our language or cultural backgrounds. So I'm a German who moved to Sweden, where there's a lot of, as I can see, American influence, or I can see now. So you bring to me an understanding of what American educational science is about, or I grasp a little bit. So, but even the term educational science is something that seems to be different in your country. You seem to speak about policies, curriculum. So even our terminology is different. So our group, we are not the only ones, we too, there's more of us. We are working on these differences, and we all depart from the question you just asked, Dan. What is pedagogy about if it's not serving us tools, if it's not about tools, how to handle a child? This is a view that also has impacts, or is very influential in Germany and Sweden. So it's not, these countries or language or cultural areas are not beyond this idea. But the tradition or the history of pedagogy on the European continent is different from this perspective, at least when it comes to some of the branches or some of the most influential pedagogical thinkers. So if it comes to instrumentalism, I would say that we should first define it. What is instrumentalism or what is pragmatism? And pragmatism, for the first, I would say, is oriented as results. So in Germany, you say der Zweck heiligt die Mittel, the means follow the results. So if you are want to reach something, then you adapt your actions to these intentions. And if you actually reach it by certain actions, then this is successful. And the actions are not the only, the most focus is not on action or the quality of the actions, it's more the quality of the results that count. And if you go into instrumentalism, then these actions that are modeled towards a certain result, they are even thought as tools in our area to handle a child, how to do it in the best way, best practice, the best teacher, etc. There's a lot of concepts and models that are coined by this idea or follow the same pattern. So this idea of best, doing in the best way, this came to the educational sciences in Germany about 2000. Before that, it was quite unknown, the best practice ideas. And so is also curriculum studies, policy discourses, etc. So I was not familiar with that when I came to Sweden in 2013 either, because the tradition is a didactical and pedagogical and Bildung tradition. And to answer or to come back to your question, to answer to this question of how to replace instrumental thinking, opens up to a horizon that you can't embrace when it comes to Germany. So there are so many pedagogical thinkers of different kinds, and we do not just refer to a few stakeholders. We have such a lot of and this is also part of Bildung, to know them and to refer to them. So we need to, we have a big history that we carry in our load and that we refer to when developing thoughts.
And let's start there, Anja, with the concept of Bildung, because as you know, it's a German word that doesn't have a neat translation in the English language. So especially for audience members here in the States that maybe are unfamiliar with the Bildung tradition, how might you begin to explain what you're referring to here with the notion of Bildung?
I think in two ways. Once I would like to refer to Wilhelm von Humboldt, who is the kind of the name that is connected to the term Bildung, and he was once a politician and philosopher and a very important thinker in the 19th century. His brother is Alexander von Humboldt, who traveled a lot and was one of the fathers of geography. So his idea was that language forms our worldviews. And as you may know, or you all know, Europe is full of languages, different languages, and some of them are, or many, or some Europeans are multilingual because they learn these languages at school. So Wilhelm von Humboldt was the father of this idea of sticking to different languages and learning about the worldviews of people who are speaking, or how language forms our worldviews. So this is Bildung on one hand side, and with it comes culture. So by reading, for example, Latin and Greek, or reading literature, you will become a person who has knowledge about the world that is needed to become political, or to decide on things. So he always had in mind the responsible person, a politically responsible person. This is on one hand side, I would see Bildung in this, and to know about culture. And not so much in natural sciences. Also, natural sciences are thought in terms of terminologies. So I learn the language of mathematics, I will learn the language of physics at schools, etc. So, and then on the other hand side, I would connect Bildung also to imagery. So this is already part of this idea of language forms our worldviews. It's also that if we are Bild is image in German, that means we are creating images of the world, and we are also active in this creation, and we have visions, we have utopias, we have ideas about the future, and this is also part of Bildung to create images. And this is done by the whole body. When we learn a language in another country and learn about their culture, then this will become part of our bodily repertoire. We will know how to, or hopefully we will maybe not know perfectly, but how to move within these foreign spaces, on these foreign places. This is Bildung, but this is only one facet. There are more. So.
Oh, sure. And as we're talking about that as being something that's very different than instrumental views of education, pragmatic views of education, you mentioned that the notion of best practices was for quite a while a very odd concept to you, and instead you've thought about pedagogical points of view from the vantage point of embodiment and body. The term that you use is bodyliness, I believe, as very important for this explanation of that you're providing. So I'm wondering, could you say more about ways that embodiment is important to this pedagogical perspective?
Yeah, I would like to give an example, best practice for something that could be best practice. If I take the example that I often use. It's to go to a bus station in a foreign country, and you're waiting for the bus together with others standing there, and the bus is not coming. The best practice in this situation, what is it? There are so many possibilities. On one hand side, you could, for example, associate all the information you got about this country, about the timetables, about media, information you got by media, about what is the organization, what are the prejudices about the country, etc. Or you could look at the faces. You could observe what others do in this situation. This could also give you some hints. Or you could act yourself. You could kind of try to do something, walk away, and you watch people doing the same, or would they stand there or stay at the places, etc. So the first approach would be discursive, theoretical. The second would be phenomenological, when I look into the faces, or the third would be performativity directed. So I will act in order to understand how others would act. And all these three things could be best practice. I do not know whether they lead to success or not. I would, of course, I also want to be successful getting on the bus finally, or getting to the place where I want to go. But I would be much more directed to the situation at hand. I would be much more directed to observation of ideas that I could get, also concepts like the concept of the country, or the idea of looking at mimics of other people, or acting, what the acting is about. So I would would think a lot, and the same is true for a situation in pedagogical, in a pedagogical situation, where I would, if I cannot, if I want to approach a child that doesn't want to be approached by me, what does that mean? Should I not approach this child? Is this best practice, or should I try to understand the circumstances in which we are? Should I try to understand my own bodiliness in relation to the child's body? Should I maybe sit down in order to reach the child, let it approach me, or shall I write something on the blackboard, or on the etc.? How should I act? So in pedagogical situations, it's often my bodily repertoire that counts, and my observations of what I'm meeting. This counts for little ones as well as for teenagers, or even for students, that I need to understand what is there, how can I approach them.
And it also sounds like you're contrasting the instrumental point of view with a much more existential vantage point. And it reminds me of the article that was shared for this webinar that you co-authored with Agnes Frang and Rose Ilamaki, where the three of you argued that wonder is an initial starting point of practice. Could you tell us more about what this means and how it might differ from instrumental and pragmatic approaches?
Yeah, I think the existential aspect is the most important. So if you are confronted with another person, you fall back into yourself. This is the first movement. You need to be yourself in relation to this other person. So you need to be open to new experiences. You need to understand that the other is not you. It's somebody who is maybe different in age and gender, in social background, etc., even in language. So I, first of all, need to deal with myself in order to being puzzled or not decided yet to respond to the other one, to wonder what he or she wants from me, or what the situation is about. So this is the first grain of each social situation, especially in pedagogical terms, because there are not a lot of praxeologies. There's not, as a politician, for example, uses a certain pattern of holding speeches or routines in as they are existing in industrial contexts. So if we meet a person, something can happen that hasn't been happening before. And this should be the first step to take into the new situation.
And now actually you're making me think about the article that you and I wrote together about conversations being a central feature of pedagogy. And our article discussing the Emperor's New Clothes. Was there more that maybe you wanted to say about our reference to both Gadamer's hermeneutic perspective and also Richard Rorty's pragmatic perspectives on conversation as sort of a way to, as a, I guess you could say, maybe antidote to problems related to politicians and particularly neoliberal policies that we wrote about, and that kind of instrumental control.
Now, I think the idea of neoliberal or even instrumental control is that you can think every human feature, everything that people do, distinct from a situation. You can model them, you can control them, you can write policies about it, give prescriptions, tell us how to act, what to do. And Heidegger's wondering, as well as Gadamer's idea about conversation, or I think you meet that in all continental approaches, at least when you go before 1930. So then you find a more you would say complicated ideas about human features, or what human beings are about, or being human is about. So if we talk with each other, we will certainly follow as adults some kinds of rules, because we are adults and we are used to make us understand each other by following or making ourselves. You can count on me in some way. I will answer, which a little one would not do, maybe, or a teenager. So there are some things that we can count on that are regular, but at the same time there are many aspects that we can't reckon on. And these things make the quality, for example, of a conversation. So I do not know what you will ask exactly. And therefore it's interesting for me to answer. I do not even know exactly what I will answer. So therefore the conversation is also interesting for me. And therefore people talk to each other. Therefore talking to each other, for example, conversation is also something that could open up an underaged in terms of getting into contact with others, because this being addressed by talking to somebody means that opening up new possibilities. So it's not something that is given. And I think we did that in our paper to try to stress with Gadamer, of course, stress this aspect of being puzzled or understanding the other as somebody who is not me, and understanding that it brings us, the conversation brings us into new areas. It makes us explore things that we didn't know before. And this is, according to Gadamer, the character of a good conversation, that we do not already know where it brings us.
Yeah, and unfortunately, oftentimes in our policy discourses. There's not good conversation in education policy. Lastly, I wanted to mention your recently published handbook that you co-edited with Christoph Wolff. And that is the Palgrave Handbook of Embodiment and Learning. And I just wanted to give you an opportunity, Anja, to share a little bit about the contents of that handbook.
Yeah, it is Christoph Wolff and me who are the editors. Christoph Wolff is even the founder of the historical anthropological approaches to pedagogy, which is one branch of human science pedagogy. This is the historical name of it. It's what we just have mentioned. So all these hundreds of pedagogical thinkers that have been related pedagogy to existential questions, like what is conversation about, or where is the initial point of learning and its wandering, etc. So he has his group, which are a lot of people, and I belong to it too. We are dealing with historical questions on one hand side. So how are human beings, or the different features of our existence, of human existence, defined by people in history, pedagogical thinkers in history, and what does that mean for today? And this group is addressing also literature, it's sociological, it's transdisciplinary, and it's also transnational. So there are writers from China, from India, from I think it was Senegal, from Argentina. So we are many worldwide, from Canada, from the US. And the idea is with this handbook, Embodiment and Learning, to find some kind of agreement on what the spectrum could be of bodiliness in terms of pedagogy. What does the corporeality, what are the tacit dimensions of pedagogy? What is happening to us in a pedagogical situation? And this can be emotions, this can be gestures, this can be gazes, that can be sensations and landscapes, space and time, etc. And how does this influence our learning? And as far as I can see, this is what, because I have been a teacher also, or I'm a teacher as at the university now, but before I've also been a teacher at the school. And this is actually what was the most important tools for me, like space, time, material, and my own body. But it wasn't a tool in terms of using it in terms of a best practice. It was more to use the whole possibilities that I have, to use my gaze, to use my gestures, to use my on which height do I address a little person, etc. So these were my tools, but not in the pragmatic instrumental sense.
Okay, very good. At this time, we can open our conversation to the audience. If there's any questions that anyone wanted to post in the Q&A, we can start receiving those questions. I will.
I think one of the questions are coming in from different channels. This is Farida Pawan, by the way. One of the questions that emerged is, what is pedagogy?
That's a good question.
This was the first very puzzling question I got in Sweden, actually, in our institution. They asked this question to everybody, and I was kind of puzzled because we are specialists, don't we know that? And to define it is, I think this is quite a thing that comes from, or we need a perspective for it. So in such a situation, when I am standing at the bus stop or when I'm approaching a child, it's not given that this is a pedagogical situation per se. I need to create a pedagogical situation out of it. So at the bus stop, for example, I could, if I'm the learner in this situation, but I could show that I'm somebody who wants to learn from somebody who is standing there. So I could create myself in a pupil-like way, then I would create a pedagogical situation. At the same time as I can create a non-pedagogical situation at school. If I'm, for example, acting like a police, or if I'm reacting like a therapist, or like a too much intimate, maybe. There are possibilities to create a pedagogical relationship by different means. And if this is the case, I would say it's a pedagogical situation, but otherwise to define pedagogy is difficult. I would say this is an action.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm wondering, could we say that a pedagogical situation is any situation where someone is learning something from someone or something else? Would that be an appropriate definition, or is that a stretch?
I would give this question to the public, because I think it's also this your question, Farida.
Farida.
It's a philosophical question also. What is because I'm in Greek, it means to lead a child, pedagogos. It's a person actually leading a child. So leading is not, again, it's also active. It's not only leadership, it's also how to accompany, how to act, how to and these specifics of acting, they are controversial, of course.
Fantastic responses, because they're, I mean, I'm just raising that because of your super nanny comment in your article, but there are 3 questions in the Q&A that are equally interesting. Dan, you want to take that over?
Sure. The first question from Dana is, if there was one, and she in all caps said one, assumption or approach of instrumental pedagogy that would be most important for embodiment to address or challenge, what would it be? So I think she might be asking for a central or maybe most significant problem associated with instrumental pedagogy that the continental perspective might challenge or think of differently.
I think the most striking aspect of instrumental thinking is giving marks.
Mhm.
So school has been output oriented since its beginning. So also in continent, or Europe, so everywhere, and of course it's result oriented, and it's especially that when it comes to research, then we know that it's the parents and the children or the pupils who think mostly instrumental. It's very difficult for parents or children or pupils not to think in instrumental ways. They want to reach good marks, nothing more. So to argue against it is very difficult in this regards. At the same time as we as teacher know that we can't reach marks only by wanting to reach them. There's no button we can press. So we always, in all countries at all times, had to argue for a way to go in order to get good marks. And this is how we argue. This is up to the pedagogues. It has always been up to the pedagogues. We do this every day. Teachers do that every day, at the same time as this is not always appreciated by politicians, as far as I can see, that we can't just press a button, and that these argumentations are part of the pedagogical work, and it can take quite a long time until a student or parent or who else understands how to get there where they all want to be.
Our next interesting question comes from my dear friend and colleague, Mary McMullen. And Mary said that she really liked the bus analogy. She said, I appreciate the holistic view of embodiment involving heart, mind, soul, all things simultaneously. How might you help future teachers to understand how to engage in wonder as a starting point and how to approach and come to know a child? So that's a good question for Mary.
Yeah, I think this is something that I really also deal with every day, because my students, they have the same problem as the pupils have, that they want good results, and they do not want to wonder about anything or not to know. This is not even demanded from them. So they want to immediately or to know how to get the good results. So to make them wonder is maybe we need to go start from the practice. We need to show what practice is about, and a good way to do it is literature. It's one way of many, but I, for example, once tried to or build my argumentation on the description of a character, and you see how strong a character can be and how different from yourself. And then, for example, Dostoevsky or something, you see that these characters, you can't just approach them as if they are machines. You need to know how to, and this is an everyday experience. And wonder is a very nice word for it. Often it means also that you have to be accept that this person doesn't want to be approached by you. And how to do that, then you need to have a repertoire on that. And I think instinctively every teacher is aware of that. Every teacher student also is aware of that. They are afraid of that. They are so much afraid of that that they want to have tools. They want to have good solutions, easy solutions, be successful. And if you tell them you are successful if you are doing this or that, then they are eased in some way, they are silenced down. But in the next dream, they are afraid again. So, or they will not be calm, because they can only be calm when they learn to observe a situation and to learn to be more open to the other person as somebody who is different from them, and being interested, as you say that here, to engage in wondering. This is a very good thing, because this is actually what pedagogy could be about. Engage in wondering, engage the others also in wondering. Oh, how is this? Where does the heat from the sun come from? Is the heat, etc. How does it come? It's so far away. Why is it here? These are questions that also the questions of the subjects are questions of wondering, and our whole life is about that.
Yeah, well, and the next question and comment comes from our friend from Chicago, Todd Price from National Louis University. He has some things that he's engaging in some wondering. And he says, one observation, I'm thinking the neoliberal impulse is to reduce conversation to that which is functional and reduced to that which can be put into use. Very important that we in education allow children to wonder before steering them toward the, in quotes, correct answer. And then he says, different question. What are your thoughts about how conversation and policy areas could allow for wonder? Interesting question from Todd.
Yeah, but I think that there are different disciplines, and I think that we also need to stick to our discipline. So the politicians, we do not expect too much wondering from politicians. So if politicians start to wonder, then it's quite difficult for the people who are, so they decided to be pragmatic and instrumental. This is what their life decision is about. But we should allow pedagogues, or the politician should set the pedagogues free in terms of fostering this possibility of being personal, because politicians in their profession is not to be personal. If I'm a personal, or if I'm addressing other persons too personal as a politician, I become corrupt, no? While a pedagogue is not corrupt when addressing Jack as Jack and Lisa as Lisa. This is allowed, and we chose this as our profession.
So this is an interesting thing that we've talked about quite a bit, Anja, about the relationship between politics and pedagogy, where, as you know, in an American context, we tend to think about education as being inherently political, where in a German context, there's a strict boundary that I think is part of your explanation.
Yeah, I think this is definitely the case. So we chose not to be politicians, we chose not to be policemen, we chose not to be doctors, medical doctors.
And then that leads us to, it's an anonymous attendee who asks an interesting question that might be related. Is pedagogy a posture one takes as well? Any thoughts on that? What might be implied by maybe taking a pedagogical stance versus and what might be some alternative postures that one could take? I guess a political posture would be different than a pedagogical posture would be part of what
I
you're
would say wondering is the posture of a pedagogue.
okay.
And accompanying person in wondering. Conversation is part of the posture, a real conversation, to be interested in what the other person is telling you,
Mhm.
to take it up, to grasp it, also to give it a shape that is important. If you hear some rudimentary ideas about something, then complement them, show more of it. Or if pupil already found a way, maybe in his or her, that is different from mine, then try to think it over. Try to go deeper into it, to understand why does this person think like that. Also think as a pedagogue, this is very important, to show, to invite the students also in your own considerations and thinking processes, thinking over things and reflecting on them.
Mhm.
This is a posture that is maybe not done in other, or it makes a medical doctor a pedagogue if he starts involving me into his ideas about my body. He becomes a pedagogue.
We have another question from Ezra, who asks, what are your thoughts on researchers' positionality in terms of embodiment? As a researcher, how to approach the conversations to discover possibilities more? Sometimes we bring our points of view as filters to the ongoing conversations unconsciously. So any thoughts on researchers' positionality and in relation to embodiment?
I think it's a very important and very difficult question. So I think every methodology has its corporeality.
Mhm.
So as I explained before, performativity, it demands acting from from a researcher, or phenomenology demands observing, or if you discourse analysis, just to stay at these three examples from the bus station, it demands that you are listening very closely. And there are much more approaches, methodologies, and the bodiliness or the bodily dimensions are often overshadowed, but they should be worked out more, I think, because these are also our, as I mentioned before, these are our tools in scientific regards too, observation, what listening, etc. Our body is our tool in research too. It's not just logics.
Yeah. Is there anything else that you wanted to say that hasn't developed in our conversation thus far?
I think in the we were kind of with the dignity of practice. We didn't mention that.
Yeah, yeah, and that is important. Before we end our time together, is there some general comments that you wanted to make about the dignity of practice?
Yeah, so I think we had a discussion about this problem that many students see with their studies. And I think one of the questions was also into this, headed into this direction, how to engage them in wondering. So students often say, oh, what is this theory about? It's too abstract. I do not understand what this has to do with my practice or the pedagogical practice. And I would say that if you really understand what practice is about and the dignity of practice, then you will realize that we are always thinking in a practical situation. There is no practice that is standing for itself and demanding something from us that we could not give. It's more that we are always going into a practical situation. We only live in practices, so we go into a new situation with a lot of concepts, theories, etc. in mind. And then the dignity of practice is that we kind of change them, that we develop our theories, that we can, for example, at this bus stop, that we really try to get different solutions for the problem, and that we try to sort things out. We try this or that way, a phenomenological or formativity approach, etc. And we realize how complex this situation is. We do not really know what to do, but we try it out, we explore it. And this is our dignity. This is what makes a pedagogue, and it's the core of pedagogical working.
Good.
Sorry.
Well, with that, thank you, Professor Kraus and Professor Castner. On behalf of the School of Education and the Global and International Engagement Unit in the School of Education, we appreciate the discussion. There are many, many questions that you've raised, and we are continuing to wonder in terms of our profession, in terms of teaching and learning. Thank you to you both.
Thank you.
Goodbye.
Bye.